What's going on, everybody? Aidan from Birds vs. Boys here, coming to you with another YouTube episode on why Jalen Hurts should be the NFL MVP. Before we get into it, make sure to like and subscribe. Huge week for us, obviously, with the Cowboys and the Eagles in the playoffs. Eagles with the bye week, but a huge Monday Night Football primetime matchup, Tom Brady versus the Cowboys. We'll have the full episode breaking down that game, the playoffs in general, and just the storylines going on with the Eagles as the 1 seed. So let's get into it. Jalen Hurts, NFL MVP. Obviously, stock in Jalen Hurts as the MVP took a severe blow with the injury, missing 2 games, and then kind of finishing out the season just trying to get through the game with no injuries and playing a very vanilla play style, and didn't really give you that Heisman moment flair that you'd want from the MVP campaign. But still, I think there's a legitimate case for him, and we'll get into a few reasons why. Even that absence that he did have, maybe that even boosted his opportunity to become NFL MVP. So if you look at it, it's probably a 2-horse race. So we're going to be talking about Patrick Mahomes a lot because you'd probably say if it's not Hurts, it's got to be Patrick Mahomes. I don't think there's any argument here or anywhere that Mahomes is the best player in the NFL right now. If you're starting a franchise tomorrow, slate wiped clean, it's a fantasy draft, you have the number 1 overall pick, you are starting your franchise with Patrick Mahomes. Let's just get that out of the way right now. But this year and this year alone, the step that Jalen Hurts has taken to elevate this Eagles team with his play after a year where they were almost running the ball in fear of him throwing, the way he came back and led them to a franchise record for wins has to play into this MVP campaign. So if we look at the stats first in terms of why he should be MVP, we have to go with the numbers. That obviously plays a huge part in the voters and who they think should be MVP. So he was top 10 in a lot of the meaningful categories: completion percentage, passing yards, QBR, interception percentage. He was actually one of the highest, second highest. He was tied for 31st with only 5 interceptions, which is great to see. Decision-making, accuracy, 2 things that we were, we'll say, critical of going into this season of Jalen Hurts. 35 total TDs, 22 passing, and 13 rushing. You have to think if he plays the full season and plays full 17 games, and maybe he wouldn't have because they would have locked up the 1 seed if he had the chance to play earlier, he would have probably surpassed 4,000 passing yards. He probably would have had 40 total touchdowns. It was an Eagles record for total yards in a season by a quarterback, so that was great for him. 3,700 passing yards, 760 rush yards. So, and he also set the single season record for fantasy points, if you care about that. So he could be fantasy MVP for you this year if you won your championship. So there are stats there where he was top 10 in a lot of the statistical categories. He was top 5 and top 2 in a lot of them before the injury. For instance, passing yards, a few guys passed him, I believe Joe Burrow, Josh Allen. But again, Jalen wasn't really playing, and that's what kind of caused, guys to catch up. Now, those guys did have 1 game canceled, so this kind of could balance out in the end. But still, every meaningful statistical category for an offensive weapon, he was top 10 as a quarterback this year. And that was a huge question mark coming into the season, as if he could actually be a top 10 quarterback. We knew he could be one of the best athletes at the quarterback position, but accuracy, throwing, using his arm to make plays instead of his legs. Could he do that? Well, I'd say with 2 receivers over 1,000 yards receiving, one of them setting the receiving yards record for the team, and the other one setting the total receptions record for a wide receiver on the team as well, probably answers that question about you for Jalen Hurts. So I think the stats are there. Patrick Mahomes is probably slightly ahead of him. He's definitely ahead of him in passing yards, passing touchdowns, things like that. But they probably even out with the rushing yards and the rushing touchdowns. And then obviously with Hurts missing time, that plays a factor, or else they'd be balanced in the end as well. So stats are there, and they kind of match up pretty well with Mahomes. He's probably a little bit less than that, though. But I think where you really start to find value is in the storylines. I talk about this in the NBA all the time. Are we doing most outstanding player? Or are we doing most valuable player? If you're talking about most valuable player, you would probably choose Jalen Hurts. Again, we talked about it at the beginning. Patrick Mahomes is the best player in the NFL. He is the most outstanding player in the NFL, which has kind of been what offensive player of the year has become in the NFL. It's the guy with the best stats who's not the most valuable player, and usually is just like the guy who's not a quarterback who's the best. But in this situation, We're talking value. Well, Jalen Hurts was 14-1 as a starter. They were 0-2 without him, including an anemic performance against the Saints where they mustered up 10 points at home in a game where they could have clinched the 1 seed, and there had to put him out there in week 17, or week 18, I'm sorry, their 17th game, to clinch that 1 seed, even though his shoulder wasn't fully healed, because they didn't trust that their backup quarterback, Gardner Minshew, could get it done, even with all of that talent around him. Between the dual threat ability and the leadership of Jalen Hurts, I just find it hard to believe that there is a player who has more value to a team this year than Hurts. Mahomes is awesome, but that foundation has been there, and it's been there for a long time. They were good before Mahomes even showed up because Andy Reid is a Hall of Fame coach. They were great with Alex Smith. Mahomes put them over a top that took them from good to great, but the foundation that the Kansas City franchise has had for quite some time is pretty remarkable. You look at the past 2 years for the Eagles. One, it was that anemic year where Hurts was a rookie and they brought him in for the Final Four games just to see if he had anything. And then last year they did make the playoffs at 9-8, but they were the 7th seed. Again, they were heavily reliant on the run, and then they played Tampa in the playoffs and just got absolutely demolished. Nobody has made a bigger leap in the NFL than Jalen Hurts as a quarterback from his first year starting to his second year starting. To be this 9-8 team where they're running the ball and they're almost this glorified triple option that you see at Army and Navy in college, to turn into this team that takes deep shots, teams that gets everybody involved in the passing game, to a point where Eagles fans are now complaining that we throw the ball too much and have done a complete 180 from the last season where we're now throwing the ball too much with Jalen Hurts and even Gardner Minshew too. I just don't think you can look at the leap that they've taken from this 9-8 team, fringe playoff team, to legitimate Super Bowl contender, franchise record in wins, 1 seed in the NFC, and it all starts with Jalen Hurts as the quarterback. And I think that leap is probably what gets Jalen Hurts the MVP nod over Patrick Mahomes, where you've seen that. You've seen the sustained success that they have. Well, the Eagles didn't have sustained success until Jalen Hurts took the leap as the passer. The value in that has taken this franchise to the next level, from fringe playoff team to Super Bowl contender. And then the last point as to why Jalen Hurts should and could win MVP actually doesn't even have to do that much with Hurts at all. Patrick Mahomes is, as we've mentioned with every single one of our points before the Chiefs fans are in the comment, is the best player in the NFL. I don't think he's the most valuable player in the NFL this year, but he is the best player. Now, if you're an NBA fan, you're a basketball fan as well, you probably remember in LeBron's prime, he won a few MVPs, but what was like the running joke, and just not even really a joke, but just the inside kind of like tip of the cat nod that people would do and NBA media voters would do, is LeBron was so good and so valuable that it was pretty much like a given that, yeah, LeBron's the best player alive. He's the best player in the game. So who's the most valuable player that's not LeBron? Because if we just chose the most valuable and the best player every year, we would just be choosing LeBron every single year. So they almost discounted him as the NBA MVP and gave it to other guys in that stretch because LeBron had become so good that nobody else could win the award. Well, we've kind of hit that point with Patrick Mahomes. If you just looked at passing yard stats and passing touchdown stats and the team in general, Patrick Mahomes is so good that he would win the award every single year. And it's not really that close of a competition. So that may impact the voters, where they're doing this thing the same as they did with LeBron in his prime. We're like, all right, yeah, it's LeBron. Yeah, we know. So who should actually win so we don't give the award to LeBron every year? The NFL is at that point. All right, we know it's Mahomes. We know he's the best player in the game. So who are we giving this award to? Because we can't just give it to Mahomes every year. And this year, it would be Jalen Hurts who would probably finish in second place. And if you discount Mahomes, he's just discredited, which is crazy logic, I know, but it helps our guy. It helps Jalen Hurts. Then Hurts would be the NBA or NFL MVP. And I think that will play into some of the voting this year. I don't think the stats are probably there to back up Hurts compared to Mahomes, especially in terms of passing. He's played less games, which obviously influence the stats. But the value you saw in the leap that this franchise took, and then the fact that voters are just kind of doing this thing, anybody but Mahomes, because we can't just hand it to Mahomes every single year. I know we've given it to Aaron Rodgers the past 2 years, but at the end of the day, you could have given it to Mahomes these past 2 years as well. So I just kind of think that's where we're at and why Jalen Hurts could be NFL MVP. I hope that he is. I hope that he is Super Bowl MVP as well. We'll see with that. So again, big show this week for us, even without the Eagles playing, because we've got injury news, including Jalen Hurts, and then the Cowboys' huge game, Monday Night Football. Tom Brady, Cowboys, you cannot beat it. This is working out really well for this podcast. We might get a divisional round matchup between us two. So make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see how the awards play out. They will announce the winners ahead of the Super Bowl in that week between the championship games and the Super Bowl. I believe it's the night before the Super Bowl. They do a big award show. So we'll find out if Jalen Hurts is the guy. If I had my vote, he'd be the guy. We will see.